Make my son here, I'll make you my wife. Mafia boss mocked poor maid. And then this happened. A ruthless king laughs in a poor maid's face until her little boy's broken hearing aid screams, and the deal turns deadly serious. He buys a surgery, but it comes with a ring, a mansion, and rules. Then the shock hits. The blast that stole the boy's hearing came from his world. A hidden ledger surfaces. The house is bugged. The cousin smiles and steals the child at night. Now the wolf and the maid race the clock. A hospital ambush, a midnight trade in a cold cannery, one perfect shot, and a choice. End this war in blood, or in daylight with the law. If a monster can become a guardian, can a bargain become a life? When love demands a price, what will they pay? And who walks out holding the boy? The service elevator's dim fluorescent light flickered as Celia Hart adjusted her housekeeping uniform, her fingers smoothing over wrinkles that wouldn't matter in the shadows of the back stairwell. The metal linen cart rattled beneath her hands, its contents hiding her most precious secret. Evan, curled small and quiet among the fresh sheets, his faulty hearing aid occasionally letting out a high-pitched whine that made her heart stutter. Late afternoon sun slanted through the narrow windows of the stairwell as she finished her shift, each step measured and careful to avoid jostling the cart too much. In the cramped break room, she pulled out the crumpled hospital letter for the 100th time. The words, "Denied," stamped in red, seeming to grow larger with each reading. Her hands shook as she calculated the bills again. Rent, food, medical expenses piling up like stones around her neck. The decision crystallized in the service elevator's slow ascent to the penthouse floor. The rattling of the ancient machinery matched her pulse as she counted the floors. 15, 16, 17. Each number brought her closer to the man everyone whispered about but never confronted. Better to face a monster than watch her son struggle in silence. When the doors parted onto the forbidden penthouse corridor, plush carpeting muffled her steps. The guards stationed outside the main suite were distracted, heads turned toward the sound of low, dangerous laughter spilling from within. Celia's legs moved on autopilot, years of invisible service letting her slip past them like a ghost. The living room opened before her, all gleaming surfaces and old-world luxury. A poker game sprawled across an elegant glass table, but the cards lay forgotten as every head turned toward her. The air thickened with predatory attention, but Celia focused only on Alexander Volkov, lounging at the table's head like a czar on his throne. Her hands didn't shake when she placed the medical letters on the glass surface. "Make my son here." The words came out steady, despite the tremor in her voice, fear and determination warring in each syllable. Alexander picked up the papers with manicured fingers, his amusement apparent as he scanned the contents. "Bold of you to think your problems merit my attention," he drawled, each word precise and cutting, "or that your poverty is my concern." He might have continued, but Evan shifted in the cart just then, the movement causing his hearing aid to emit its telltale squeal. The sound sliced through the room's tension, and something in Alexander's expression shifted, became sharper, more focused. With a lazy gesture, he dismissed the guards and his audience. They melted away like shadows at dawn, leaving Celia alone with one of the most dangerous men in the city. The cart suddenly felt like flimsy protection. "Tell me," he said, voice clipped but curious. "Why should I care about one child's silence?" Celia stood straighter, chin lifted. "Because you can fix it with a phone call, and I'm willing to pay the price." "Ah," his smile was all teeth. "And what do you imagine that price to be?" "Whatever you name, as long as it's something I can live with." Alexander leaned forward, fingers steepled. "A year of marriage. You'll be my public face, my domestic peace. You'll manage my household with the same efficiency you've shown in my hotel. In exchange, I'll provide the surgeon, the hospital, and ensure no one asks inconvenient questions." "I don't want charity," Celia said, the words tasting like ash. "Charity?" He laughed, the sound hollow and sharp. "I don't deal in charity, Ms. Hart. I deal in exchanges, clean ones with clear terms and definite endings." Time seemed to stretch like taffy as they stared at each other across the expensive table. Outside, the sun had set, city lights beginning to jewel the darkening sky. Celia's uniform felt too tight, too thin, against the air-conditioned chill of the room. "Think carefully," Alexander said, sliding a business card across the glass surface. "This offer expires at sunrise." The card felt like it burned against her palm as Celia wheeled the cart toward the service elevator. The guard held the door, his face carefully blank. As the doors slid closed, she leaned down toward the hidden space among the linens. "It's okay, baby," she whispered to Evan. "Mama will decide before morning comes." The elevator descended, carrying them back to their world of fluorescent lights and thin walls. Celia's fingers kept brushing against the card in her pocket, its edges sharp enough to cut. She had until sunrise to choose between impossible options, to decide if she could bear being owned by a monster, to give her son a chance at a full life. Outside the service entrance, the city hummed with its usual evening chaos. But inside the hotel's back corridors, Celia's world had narrowed to the weight of a business card and the soft breathing of her son among the linens, each second ticking away like a countdown to sunrise. The first city bus rattled past Celia's window, its diesel rumble marking dawn's arrival. She sat at her scratched kitchen table, counting yesterday's tips for the second time. The bills were worn thin, edges soft from countless hands, but they still wouldn't stretch far enough. Evan slept in the next room, his hearing aid on the nightstand beside him. Celia pushed back from the table and went to him, pressing a gentle kiss to his dark curls. He stirred but didn't wake, peaceful in the early morning quiet. The business card sat on her dresser, stark white against the water-stained wood. Its embossed letters caught the pale light. Alexander Volkov. She'd stared at it half the night, weighing impossible choices. "Just hear him out," she whispered to herself. "In daylight, with clear heads." Mrs. Rodriguez from down the hall agreed to watch Evan, clucking sympathetically at Celia's mention of a job interview. The lie tasted bitter, but it was safer than the truth. The hotel looked different in morning sun, less intimidating without its evening glamour. Celia squared her shoulders, card clutched in her palm. She'd return it, walk away, find another solution. Ms. Hart. A man in an impeccable suit materialized beside her. "Mr. Volkov sent me." He extended a cream-colored envelope, heavy with expensive paper. Celia's name was written across the front in elegant script. "I didn't agree to anything," she said. Nevertheless, he remained perfectly still, arm extended. Inside, she found an audiology appointment scheduled for the following week and a cashier's check that made her breath catch. The amount would cover initial hospital fees with room to spare. Anger flared, hot and clean. She marched past startled security, taking the executive elevator to Alexander's office. His assistant didn't try to stop her. Alexander looked up from his desk, unsurprised. Celia placed the unopened envelope before him. "Not like this," she said. He leaned back, amusement cooling to something harder. "Wolves don't nibble politely, Ms. Hart. We take what we want how we want it." A commotion erupted outside, shouting, the pop of a camera flash. Alexander's phone buzzed with security alerts. "Rival family," he murmured, studying her, testing boundaries. His eyes tracked over her simple dress, her careful posture. "You look like redemption in cotton polyester blend." He opened a drawer and withdrew a thick document. "My terms: 1 year of marriage, complete confidentiality, public appearances as required. You'll live in my house, manage my household. In exchange, I cover everything: surgery, recovery, lifetime maintenance. All discreet, all guaranteed." Celia read carefully, stopping at a clause buried in legal language. "Emergency guardianship? If you're incapacitated, Evan needs protection. My name shields him. Your name traps him. The world is full of traps, Ms. Hart. Better mine than theirs." A familiar cough in the hallway made them both turn. Through the glass partition, Celia saw Mrs. Rodriguez with Evan, early from school. Alexander's gaze flickered to the boy, expression shifting too quickly to read. Celia's hand was steady as she took the pen. She added one line in clear script. "No physical intimacy without explicit consent." Alexander's mouth quirked. He countersigned without hesitation, then pressed a button on his desk. "Champagne," he ordered when his assistant appeared. "And call Judge Matthews. We'll need the courthouse at dusk." The assistant vanished. Alexander didn't touch the champagne when it arrived, but his eyes never left Celia as she texted Mrs. Rodriguez. "Please bring Evan to the courthouse. Going to need a witness." Late afternoon sun slanted through the office windows, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. The pen felt heavy in Celia's hand, the weight of futures balanced on its tip. She met Alexander's gaze steadily, refusing to bend even as she yielded. 1 year, she said. 1 year, he agreed, voice soft with something that wasn't quite kindness. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Cars honked, people shouted, life went on unchanged. But in that office, with signed papers between them and champagne going flat in crystal glasses, everything had shifted. Celia watched Evan through the glass, animated as he showed Mrs. Rodriguez something in his backpack. His hearing aid whistled faintly, a sound that would soon be memory. "The car will take you home to pack," Alexander said. "My staff will handle the rest." She nodded, gathering her composure like armor. "I'll need an hour." "Take 2. The judge doesn't mind waiting." Celia stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced hands. The familiar motion centered her, a reminder that she was still herself, still in control of the essential things. "You'll want to change," Alexander added. "There will be photographs." Of course there would be. Everything was performance now, a careful dance of appearances and power. But Celia had spent years making herself invisible in this very hotel. She knew how to move through spaces that didn't want her, how to bend without breaking. She walked to the door, steps measured and calm. Behind her, Alexander was already on the phone, directing the machinery of his world to accommodate this new piece on his board. The champagne sat untouched, bubbles rising and falling in endless cycles. Through the window, the sun continued its slow descent toward dusk, when promises would become contracts and choices would become chains. The judge's chambers felt too small for the weight of what was happening. Sunset painted the institutional walls in muted orange, casting long shadows across worn carpeting. Alexander stood like a statue carved from authority, his charcoal wool suit a statement of power. Next to him, Celia's thrift store dress whispered defiance in soft cotton and careful mending. On a wooden bench against the wall, Evan traced the paths of an old toy car across a legal pad, the wheels making soft scratching sounds in the quiet room. His hearing aid whistled occasionally, a reminder of why they were here. Judge Matthews cleared his throat, shuffling papers with practiced efficiency. "Shall we begin?" The civil ceremony was brief, words falling like stones into still water. Alexander's responses were precise, clipped. Celia's were clear, unwavering. The ring slid onto her finger, cool and heavy with implications. "Try not to cry on my shoes, Mrs. Volkov," Alexander murmured, his mouth curving with dark amusement. Celia met his gaze steadily. "Try not to mistake ownership for love." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or respect, before his expression smoothed back to careful neutrality. Outside, camera flashes erupted like lightning, turning the courthouse steps into a gauntlet of light and shouted questions. Alexander moved with fluid grace, his body becoming a shield between the cameras and his new family. His hand at Celia's elbow was impersonal, but sure as he guided them to a waiting silver car with windows tinted black as secrets. The drive to his estate passed in weighted silence. Evan pressed his face to the window, watching the city transform from familiar streets to manicured lanes. The mansion rose before them, austere and elegant, its windows gleaming in the last light of day. Staff materialized as they entered, efficient, disciplined shadows who moved with careful precision. Celia noted their careful distance from Alexander, the way their eyes dropped when he passed. "Your room," he said, leading them up a curved staircase to a suite that took Celia's breath away, despite herself. The space was beautiful, all soft colors and elegant furnishings. Separate from his quarters, she noticed. A gilded cage, but a cage with boundaries. "The rules are simple," Alexander stated, standing by the doorway. "Don't lie to me, ever. Don't disobey in front of my men. It undermines authority they need to respect. And do not open locked doors. They're locked for reasons." Celia lifted her chin. "I have rules too. Don't touch me without permission. Don't use my son as leverage. And do not confuse protection with control." Alexander laughed, a sound devoid of warmth but full of something else, something that suggested he'd never needed love, never wanted it. But his eyes told a different story, one he seemed to realize too late. He looked away first, jaw tightening. While Evan explored the connected bedroom that would be his, Celia's phone buzzed with notifications. Alexander's lawyer had been busy. Spousal visa applications, insurance updates, legal documents that wrapped around her life like silk ropes. Each electronic signature she'd given now anchored her more firmly to this new reality. The household settled into night rhythms. Staff moved quietly through their evening duties. Security teams changed shifts with military precision. Celia tucked Evan into his new bed, surrounded by more pillows than he'd ever owned, his toy car parked carefully on the nightstand. "Good night, brave boy," she whispered, kissing his forehead. After he fell asleep, she stood at her window, watching the city lights sparkle below. On the terrace, Alexander paced as he spoke on his phone, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The stars wheeled overhead, distant and cold, while the city hummed its endless song of life and motion. He turned, caught her silhouette in the window. Neither looked away. The moment stretched between them, taut with something neither could deny, an awareness that crackled like the electricity that had lit up the courthouse steps, dangerous and inevitable as lightning. The curtains remained open, the stars continued their ancient dance, and somewhere in the city, clocks ticked toward midnight in a house where nothing would ever be the same. Celia's fingers traced the cool band of her new ring, its weight both foreign and final. Below, Alexander ended his call, but remained on the terrace, his presence a gravitational force she could feel even through glass and distance. The mansion creaked softly, settling into itself. In his new room, Evan's breathing was deep and peaceful. Security cameras blinked their red eyes at regular intervals, monitoring, recording, protecting, or trapping. Perhaps both. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, learning the rhythms of this place, navigating the complex web of relationships and power dynamics that made up Alexander's world. But for now, there was only this moment. A woman at a window, a man on a terrace, and the electric current of unspoken possibilities flowing between them. The city spread out below them like a carpet of stars, oblivious to the delicate balance of power and attraction playing out in the mansion on the hill. Inside, the staff moved like ghosts, preparing the house for another day. Outside, the security teams maintained their vigilant watch, their weapons hidden but ready. And still, neither Celia nor Alexander looked away, caught in a moment that balanced on the edge of something neither was ready to name. The morning sun slanted through tall windows, casting long shadows across the kitchen where Celia stood, staring at coffee so dark it looked like oil. The industrial-sized machine had produced something that smelled like salvation and tasted like punishment. She'd woken early, driven by the need to impose order on at least one corner of this controlled chaos. The pantry beckoned, a space of wealth but zero organization. Armed with a label maker and clip art printed from her phone, she began transforming the space. "What's this one?" Evan asked, holding up a container. "Pasta," Celia said clearly, letting him see her lips. He nodded, carefully placing the pictorial label on the drawer. Together they worked through the morning, creating a system even a child could navigate independently. At 10, the atmosphere shifted. A man in an expensive suit with poorly concealed bruises on his knuckles strode in, heading straight for Alexander's study. Celia caught fragments of the conversation through the door left ajar. "Benedetto Caruso," the man said, voice tight with urgency. 3 shipments delayed, customs suddenly finding problems with paperwork that was clean yesterday. The transformation was instant and chilling. Alexander's voice dropped to that dangerous register that made the air feel thin. "Find out who he's paying. Names, account numbers, dates." "Already done." Papers rustled. "He's getting bold." "Then we'll remind him why caution serves him better." Alexander's tone carried the finality of a judge's gavel. "Start with the dock supervisor. Make it look natural." Celia busied herself with the spice rack, trying to appear absorbed when the man left. But her hands shook slightly as she alphabetized oregano and paprika. The danger wasn't theoretical anymore. It lived in whispered names and bloody knuckles. The day crept forward. She kept Evan close, teaching him the new layout she'd created, watching him beam with pride when he could fetch ingredients without help. The kitchen staff worked around them with careful politeness, their eyes occasionally darting to the windows as if expecting shadows to materialize. Just before dinner, while Evan was washing his hands, something whispered across the floor, a Polaroid sliding under the kitchen door. Celia's heart stopped when she picked it up. The familiar playground of Evan's old school stared back at her. A garish red X marked over the swings where her son had spent countless recesses. Before she could move, Katya appeared, a lethal presence in tailored black, materializing as if she'd been summoned by the threat itself. Without a word, she took the photo and vanished to sweep the grounds. Celia watched through the window as the security specialist moved with predatory grace, checking sightlines and access points. Alexander's response was immediate and cold. 9 p.m., hospital boardroom, the surgeon will take my call. His phone appeared in his hand, text flying from his fingers. "Katya, full detail, no gaps." The hospital's boardroom felt sterile and imposing at night. Through the video call, the surgeon's face showed carefully masked annoyance at the late hour. Alexander spoke in clipped sentences about accelerated timelines and priority scheduling. The surgeon began to protest about waiting lists and protocols. "Doctor," Alexander interrupted softly, "I don't believe you understand. This isn't a request." The silence that followed had weight. "Check your email. I've made arrangements that should clarify my position." Later, on the terrace, Celia finally confronted him. City lights sparkled below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. "I see it now," she said. "What the papers say about you? The monster they warn about?" Alexander turned, moonlight catching the sharp planes of his face. "The monster serves a purpose," he replied, voice level. "If you want your boy safe, truly safe, you'll accept that the teeth come with the tenderness, at least the tenderness I reserve for this house, for its occupants." His words hung in the space between them, heavy with implication. Celia wrapped her arms around herself, unable to deny the truth in them, unable to fully accept it either. Close to midnight, Celia lay fully dressed atop her duvet, one hand resting on Evan's back, monitoring each steady breath. Down the hall, light spilled from Alexander's study. He stood at the window, the threatening Polaroid in his hand, jaw set as he typed out messages that would force a hospital to bend its rules, hurry a surgery, protect a child who wasn't his by blood, but was now his to defend. The house hummed with quiet activity. Security patrols, surveillance monitors, staff moving like shadows through their late routines. Katya's boots made no sound on the hardwood as she completed another circuit. The night air carried distant city sounds through slightly open windows, sirens, traffic, the normal chaos of urban life, continuing unaware of the power plays and protection schemes being orchestrated from this hillside mansion. In her room, Celia counted Evan's breaths, each one a reminder of why she'd signed those papers, why she'd agreed to this dangerous dance. The ring on her finger caught the dim light, no longer feeling quite so foreign. Below her window, armed men patrolled with mechanical precision, their weapons concealed but ready, their eyes scanning for threats in every shadow. Time ticked forward, measured in heartbeats and breath, in the soft glow from Alexander's study where he continued his work, in the whispered updates from Katya's earpiece, in the steady rhythm of a child's peaceful sleep. All the pieces of this new life falling into their ordained places as midnight approached. Morning came with a metallic chill, the convoy assembling in precise formation outside the mansion. Black SUVs lined up like armored beasts, their windows tinted against the pale dawn. Alexander stood by the lead vehicle with Katya, his posture rigid as he surveyed the grounds. His dark suit absorbed the early light, making him look carved from shadow. Celia guided Evan into the second car, her fingers gentle on his shoulder. The boy's excitement about the hospital visit showed in his bouncing steps, innocent to the tension crackling through the adults around him. 2 more vehicles fell into place, boxing them in like a moving fortress. The drive passed in taut silence, the convoy flowing through traffic with practiced precision. At each intersection, Katya's voice crackled over the radio, coordinating movements with military efficiency. Celia watched the city blur past, holding Evan's hand as he pressed his face to the window, fascinated by their escort. The hospital's pre-op ward smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Under fluorescent lights, the audiologist's office felt smaller than it should, crowded with their security detail hovering outside. The doctor's fingers flew over her keyboard, frowning at test results and old records. "The hearing loss pattern is consistent with blast trauma," she said, turning her screen to show sound wave graphs. "Approximately 2 years ago, based on the scarring pattern." The memory slammed into Celia like a physical force. That night by the river, the warehouse explosion that had rattled their apartment windows sent car alarms screaming through the neighborhood. The awful silence that followed, heavier than any sound she'd ever known. Evan's confusion when his favorite cartoon suddenly went mute. Alexander's face hardened. He spoke in clipped tones, ordering the record sealed, but Celia had already seen the recognition in his eyes. "Why?" Her voice cut through his instructions. "Why seal it?" His pause lasted 3 heartbeats. When he spoke, the truth fell between them like a knife. "The blast was under my flag. A former lieutenant settling accounts without authorization. I didn't order it, but it happened on my watch." The hatred rose in Celia's chest, clear and cold as glacier ice. She looked at him and saw not the man who'd promised to help her son, but the architect of their suffering. Alexander met her gaze, and for the first time, his carefully constructed walls cracked. Guilt bled from him like an open wound. "I will find every man responsible," he said, each word weighted with iron. "They'll face justice in a court or answer to me in a grave. Your choice." The rest of the appointment passed in brittle silence. The surgeon reviewed procedures, discussed recovery timelines, all while Celia's mind echoed with explosions. and Alexander's confession played on repeat. Evan, oblivious to the adult undertow, charmed the medical staff with his bright smile and careful lip reading. The drive back to the estate felt longer. Alexander spoke quietly into his phone, increasing security protocols, redirecting resources. Katya received new orders. She would shadow Evan personally, her lethal skills now dedicated to his protection. Legal teams were mobilized to draft documents for a victims fund, though Alexander never spoke the word penance aloud. Late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the mansion's grounds. Inside, the staff moved with heightened alertness, responding to the tension radiating from their employer. Celia took Evan to his room, needing space to breathe, to process, to find a way forward through this new knowledge. She sat cross-legged on the floor, Evan mirroring her position. Their familiar rhythm game began, a way she'd taught him to feel music when his world went quiet. Her hands clapped against her throat, letting him feel the vibrations of simple songs. Pat, pat, pause, pat, pat, pause. Evan's delighted giggles filled the room as he copied her movements. In the doorway, unseen, Alexander stood motionless. He watched a mother transform trauma into melody, pain into connection. His hands clenched at his sides as Evan's laughter echoed down the hallway. Joyful sounds from a child his actions had silenced. The weight of responsibility settled deeper into his bones as he witnessed this moment of pure love, this reminder of what his world could destroy. Celia's voice hummed low and sweet as she guided Evan's small hands to feel the rhythm. The setting sun painted them in soft gold, a tableau of resilience and adaptation. Mother and son finding music in silence, creating beauty from broken pieces. The moment stretched, holding all the complexity of their situation, the violence that had brought them here, the healing they sought, the unexpected connections forming despite the damage between them. Evan clapped along with his mother's rhythm, his face bright with concentration and joy. Security cameras whirred silently in the corners. Katya's shadow moved past windows. Phones buzzed with updates from legal teams and surveillance units. But in this room, in this moment, there was only the steady beat of hands against throat, the shared smiles between mother and son, and the silent witness in the doorway, carrying the weight of past actions and future promises. Morning light spilled across the breakfast table, catching on the colored blocks scattered between coffee cups and untouched pastries. Alexander sat cross-legged on the floor, his usual sharp suit incongruous against the casual pose, while Evan carefully balanced another block on their growing tower. Perfect placement, Alexander said, emphasizing each P so Evan could catch the shape of the words. Now, which color comes next? Evan studied the pattern, small fingers hovering over the blocks. Blue, he answered, voice pitched slightly too loud in the quiet room. Excellent deduction. Alexander exaggerated the D, turning the speech exercise into something that made Evan beam with pride. From the doorway, Celia watched, her hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea. The sight of Alexander, the man whose actions had stolen her son's hearing, now teaching him to read lips with such gentle patience, created a confusing ache in her chest. Warmth crept in, despite her determination to keep her walls intact. Her phone buzzed. Another news alert. Their wedding photo splashed across tabloid headlines. Volkov tamed, and crime lord's secret bride. The media circus was exactly what Alexander wanted, a carefully crafted image of domesticity to make Caruso underestimate him. We have lunch reservations at Bellamy's, Alexander announced, rising smoothly from the floor. The paparazzi have been tipped off naturally. Celia nodded, already understanding the game. How many photographers? Enough to look spontaneous. His smile held a predator's cunning. Wear the blue dress Katya left in your closet. The restaurant was exactly as orchestrated, exclusive enough to seem natural, public enough to guarantee coverage. When cameras swarmed their entrance, Alexander's hand found the small of her back, steady and warm, through the silk of her dress. The touch remained until she gave a slight nod, signaling she had her footing. Inside the private booth, away from flashing bulbs, tension crackled between them. You can't control every variable, Celia said, sliding her water glass in precise circles. I can try. Alexander's voice held steel beneath the casual tone. The house staff is terrified to move a pillow without permission. Good. Order creates safety. Order creates paranoia. She picked up the wine list, using it as a shield. Yesterday, your housekeeper asked my permission to dust my room. My permission to do her job. Unexpectedly, Alexander laughed. A real sound, startling in its warmth. Are you suggesting I need a chore wheel? Perhaps a cleaning schedule posted in the kitchen? The absurdity of it, domestic management charts in a crime lord's fortress, broke through Celia's frustration. Her lips twitched, color-coded, obviously, with gold stars for completion. Naturally, we'll have quarterly performance reviews. They were both laughing now, the sound carrying enough to make their security detail shift uncomfortably. This wasn't in the script for today's performance. Back at the estate, the afternoon sun cast long shadows through tall windows. A car backfired outside the gate, a sharp crack that made the floor vibrate. Evan, playing nearby, jerked at the sensation rather than the muffled sound his current hearing aid barely caught. Before Celia could move, Alexander was there, scooping Evan into his arms with surprising gentleness. "Just a car, little warrior," he murmured, though Evan couldn't hear the words clearly. "Nothing to fear while I'm here." Evan relaxed into the hold, small fingers curling into Alexander's shirt collar. The trust in that gesture, the way Alexander's expression softened as he held her son, it cracked something in Celia's carefully maintained defenses. Night fell slowly, wrapping the mansion in velvet darkness. In her separate bedroom, Celia lay awake, tracing the edge between want and fear with restless fingers. The day had shown her too many versions of Alexander, the strategist using their marriage as bait, the crime lord with blood on his ledgers, the man who taught her son patterns with infinite patience. Each facet drew her closer to a truth she wasn't ready to name. Down the hall, in his own room, Alexander stared at the ceiling he'd never properly noticed before. Now he caught every detail, the slight texture of the paint, the way shadows played across it, because silence wasn't truly silent anymore. Not with Celia's breathing somewhere in his house, not with Evan's small sounds of sleep carrying through the walls. Their presence filled empty spaces he hadn't known were hollow, like proof that life existed beyond violence and power plays. The night stretched between them, full of unspoken things. In the security room below, monitors showed empty corridors and peaceful grounds. Guards patrolled the perimeter with practiced precision. Everything was controlled, contained, exactly as Alexander had built it to be. Yet inside these walls, something uncontrollable was growing, something that made him notice ceilings and laugh at chore charts and scoop up frightened children without thinking twice. In her room, Celia's fingers found the cool metal of her wedding ring. In his, Alexander listened to the subtle symphony of his house breathing. Both lay awake, separated by walls and choices and complicated truths, while the night wrapped around them like a promise neither was ready to keep. Dawn painted the hospital bathroom in harsh fluorescent light as Celia's fingers trembled through another attempt at braiding her hair. The mirror reflected Alexander behind her, his presence solid as a fortress wall, watching her struggle with the simple task. Her hands shook too much to manage the strands. "Let me," he said quietly, stepping closer. She met his eyes in the mirror, surprised. "You know how to braid?" "I had a sister once." He didn't elaborate, but his fingers moved with practiced ease, sectioning her hair into 3 parts. The gentle pressure of his hands steadied her tremors. Outside, the hospital stirred to life. Morning rounds echoed through corridors, wheels squeaked on linoleum, and somewhere a phone rang unanswered. Time felt stretched thin, like a wire about to snap. Pre-op was a maze of curtains and beeping machines. A nurse with kind eyes appeared with a wheelchair, and suddenly it was time. Evan looked small in the hospital gown, his worn hearing aid already removed. Celia knelt before him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Brave boy," she whispered against his skin. "I'll be right here when you wake up." Alexander stepped forward, placing 2 fingers on Evan's shoulder, a gesture so precise it could only be deliberate. Something passed between man and child, an unspoken vow that made Evan's shoulders straighten. The double doors loomed ahead. As the nurse began to wheel Evan forward, movement caught Katya's attention at the far end of the corridor. Her hand twitched toward her concealed weapon a fraction too late. The bouquet by the nurse's station exploded in a shower of petals as a bullet shattered its vase. Time compressed to heartbeats and muzzle flashes as Caruso's men materialized from the morning crowd. "Down!" Alexander's command cracked like a whip. He was already moving, pushing Celia behind a medicine cart while drawing his weapon with fluid grace. The corridor transformed into a kill zone. Civilians screamed and scattered, but Alexander's focus never wavered. He eliminated threats with terrifying precision. 2 clean shots, a 3rd man taken down with brutal hand-to-hand efficiency when ammunition might endanger bystanders. His orders cut through chaos, directing security to lock down exits and protect civilians while containing the threat. Celia watched him work, seeing truly for the first time how the monster she'd feared had become their shield. Every movement was measured, every decision calculated to minimize collateral damage while maintaining absolute control of the battlefield. Katya materialized beside them, efficiently checking Celia for injuries before securing Evan's wheelchair. The boy's eyes were wide but steady, tracking the action with unusual calm. When it ended, the corridor held the aftermath of violence, scattered flowers, brass casings, and the heavy silence that follows gunfire. Hospital security swarmed in, followed by Alexander's cleanup crew, disguised as various staff members. The incident would be sanitized before it could reach the news. They found themselves on a vinyl couch in a private waiting room, the surgery proceeding despite the morning's excitement. Alexander had rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms marked with old scars. Dried blood, not his own, stained one white cuff. "I had a brother," he said suddenly, voice low. "Younger, brilliant with numbers, terrible at chess. I was supposed to protect him." He stared at his hands, seeing something beyond the present moment. "I trusted the wrong person, believed a liar who claimed to want peace. The furnace blast that followed?" He trailed off, jaw tight. "I made myself colder than law after that, built walls with blood and paper, vowed never to be that naive again." Celia absorbed this, understanding blooming. After a long moment, she offered her own truth in exchange. 2 years ago, I worked night shift at an import company. The books never balanced, but the manager kept bringing in cash deposits after hours." She met his gaze steadily. "One night, I found their real ledger, Caruso's operation, money laundering through shell companies. I took it." Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "You stole from Benedetto Caruso?" "I didn't trust the police to protect us if I turned it in, so I hid it." Her chin lifted. "Sometimes survival means making dangerous choices." He studied her with new appreciation, seeing not a victim of circumstance, but a woman who made strategic moves in a game she shouldn't have had to play. The hours crept by. Alexander's phone buzzed periodically with updates as his organization hunted down the source of the morning's attack. Celia alternated between pacing and sitting, counting ceiling tiles and trying not to watch the clock. Late afternoon light slanted through windows when the surgeon appeared, still in scrubs. "The procedure went well," she announced with a tired smile. "We'll begin calibration tomorrow, but he needs quiet and rest for now." Relief hit Celia like a physical force. She turned to Alexander, found his arms already opening, and let herself break against his chest. His heartbeat was steady under her ear as he released a single, shaky exhale, the only sign that he'd been afraid too. Through the window, the city continued its endless rhythm. In recovery, Evan slept peacefully, monitored by Katya's watchful presence. And in a private waiting room, a woman who stole secrets held on to a man who dealt in violence, both of them learning that protection wore many faces, and strength could be found in unexpected places. Golden light spilled through the recovery room's windows, casting warm shadows across the sterile space. Dust motes danced in the slanted beams, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere in the clinical setting. Evan stirred beneath crisp sheets, his small form dwarfed by the hospital bed. The white linens rustled softly as he shifted, his dark lashes fluttering against pale cheeks, still flushed from anesthesia. The audiologist stood ready with her equipment, a gentle smile warming her professional demeanor as she watched monitors and adjusted dials, preparing to test the implant's calibration. Her fingers moved with practiced precision over the technology that would bridge Evan to a world of sound. A soft chime filled the room, clear as crystal and gentle as rain. Evan's eyes widened, the hazel irises expanding with shock. His fingers clutched the blanket, knuckles whitening as he processed the new sensation flooding his consciousness. Then, like sunshine breaking through clouds after a lifetime of storms, a smile spread across his face. Pure, unadulterated wonder at this first clear sound ever to truly reach him. Tears streamed down Celia's cheeks, carving glistening paths she didn't bother to wipe away. She pressed her trembling hands to her mouth, trying desperately to contain the sob of joy threatening to escape her throat. Her shoulders shook with the effort of staying quiet, not wanting to overwhelm him with too much noise at once. Every maternal instinct in her body screamed to rush to him, to hold him, to share this moment skin to skin. But she restrained herself, letting him process this new reality at his own pace. Evan's lips moved carefully, forming a shape he'd practiced countless times in speech therapy, but never truly heard before. "Hi," he said, the words slightly awkward but brimming with triumph and discovery. Celia's sob turned to laughter, bright and beautiful as birdsong. The sound bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, a place that had been locked away since the accident. She reached for him then, careful of the bandages wrapped around his head, and pressed her forehead to his. The connection grounded them both in this miracle moment. Alexander maintained his distance, a dark figure against the warm light. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the tiled floor as he watched them with an expression caught between tenderness and uncertainty, a man unaccustomed to witnessing joy rather than creating fear. He remained perfectly still until Evan noticed him through the tangle of his mother's arms. The boy extended his hand, reaching toward the man who had made this miracle possible with his power, wealth, and unexpected compassion. Hesitantly, Alexander approached the bed, each step measured and careful, as if afraid his very presence might shatter this fragile moment. When Evan's small fingers found his jaw, touching the place where words formed with innocent curiosity, something fundamental shifted in Alexander's eyes. The carefully constructed walls of years crumbled and rebuilt themselves around this new reality, one where he wasn't just the monster who dealt in violence, but someone worthy of a child's trust and gratitude. The drive home passed in comfortable quiet, mindful of the doctor's strict instructions against overstimulation, limited visitors, daily calibration appointments, a peaceful environment for healing. The estate welcomed them with subdued lighting and staff moving on silent feet across marble floors. Fresh flowers had appeared in every room, their gentle fragrance creating an atmosphere of calm and renewal. Evan's room had been prepared with extra pillows, arranged in a protective nest, and his favorite stuffed animals carefully positioned on the bed. The worn teddy bear with one eye, the plush dinosaur, and the soft rabbit he'd loved since infancy. Celia helped him change into soft blue pajamas patterned with stars, while Alexander spoke quietly with security in the hall, updating protocols for the recovery period and ensuring absolute control over who could access the wing where Evan would heal. After tucking Evan in and kissing his forehead, her lips lingering on his skin as if to seal in the day's blessing, Celia found Alexander waiting in the corridor. His expression was serious but not cold, the face of a man with business to conduct but without the usual chill of calculation. "The ledger," he said simply, his voice low. "I need it now." Celia straightened her spine, tired but resolved, ready to negotiate the terms she'd been planning for years. "I want guarantees first. My freedom when the year ends, no strings, no surveillance, no unexpected visits, and protection for the innocent people caught in Caruso's web. The cleaning staff at his shell companies, the delivery drivers, the bookkeepers, who don't know what they're really recording. They don't deserve to be collateral damage when you move against him." Alexander studied her for a long moment, his eyes traveling over the stubborn set of her jaw, the intelligence in her gaze, the unwavering principle that guided her even when dealing with a man like him. "You've thought this through," he said, a hint of admiration coloring his tone. "I've had 2 years to think it through," she replied, unflinching under his scrutiny. 2 years of carrying that burden while raising my son alone." He nodded slowly, decision crystallizing in his eyes. "Agreed. The innocents will be protected, relocated if necessary with new identities and employment. And when our contract ends, you'll have your freedom, though I hope by then you won't want it." The last words emerged softer, almost vulnerable. The honesty in his voice made her breath catch in her throat. "I'll trust you, for now." That trust crackled between them like electricity, drawing them closer in the shadowed hallway where moonlight slanted through tall windows. Neither could say who moved first when their lips met in the half-darkness. The kiss was defiance and relief tangled together, hot and desperate and inevitable. His hands framed her face with unexpected gentleness, while hers gripped his shirt, bunching expensive fabric between her fingers. The contact seared away pretense and calculation, leaving only raw need exposed between them. Before it could deepen further, before hands could wander beyond propriety, Celia pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the thunderous beat of his heart. Alexander immediately stilled, respecting the boundary even as his breath came fast and his pupils were blown wide with desire. They separated slowly, reluctantly, the air between them charged with possibility and restraint. Outside, beyond the manicured grounds and security perimeters, the estate's gates opened to admit a contractor's van for scheduled maintenance of the heating system. Guards checked credentials, swept under the vehicle with mirrors, and waved it through. The toolbox carried in by the overall-clad worker contained more than just equipment for repair. A tiny listening device, no bigger than a button battery, nestled among the wrenches and pliers. While the household slept, Caruso's plant slipped the bug into a vent in the laundry room, where it would rest unnoticed among the hum of machines and the scent of detergent. The moon climbed high over the estate as midnight passed, casting silver light across manicured lawns and casting the security guards in ghostly relief. In the laundry room, a soft electronic buzz merged with the ambient sounds of the heating system. The bug sat quietly gathering intelligence, waiting to be discovered by the one person who spent hours folding linens and organizing supplies in that space. Celia herself, whose meticulous attention to detail might be their salvation or their undoing. Upstairs, Evan slept peacefully, his new world of sound temporarily muted by dreams filled with color and movement. Celia checked on him one last time before retiring to her room, her fingertips brushing against her lips, still tingling from the kiss that had changed everything and nothing. Alexander worked late in his study, dividing his attention between security reports and thoughts of how she felt in his arms. Vulnerable and strong at once, a paradox he couldn't solve but desperately wanted to understand. The estate settled into night's rhythm, unaware of the electronic eye that had burrowed into its heart. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, calibration appointments, physical therapy, and the constant dance of protection and power that defined their strange arrangement. But for now, in the quiet hours, peace held sway over the household as stars wheeled overhead and city lights glimmered in the distance. False beacons of safety in a world where dangers lurked in shadows and sometimes in plain sight. Morning light filtered through the small window of the laundry room as Celia folded towels, her movements precise and methodical. The routine had become almost meditative over the past weeks, a space where she could think while keeping her hands busy. A soft, irregular ticking caught her attention. At first, she dismissed it as the aging heating system, but something about the rhythm felt wrong. She paused, tilting her head to locate the source. The sound led her to a vent near the floor, its metal grate slightly askew. Kneeling, Celia peered inside. A small device wrapped in black electrician's tape nestled in the dusty corner, its LED blinking an artificial green that didn't match any of the estate's security equipment. Her heart rate quickened as she carefully extracted it, the metal still warm from whatever signal it had been transmitting. She found Katya in the kitchen, cleaning a knife with methodical precision. The bodyguard's expression didn't change as Celia showed her the device, but her movements became sharper, more focused. Together, they moved through the house with deliberate care, sweeping room after room. They found 3 more bugs, one behind a painting in the dining room, another in Alexander's study, and a third in the main hallway. When Alexander arrived, summoned by Katya's urgent text, his reaction was controlled but lethal. His anger wasn't directed at Celia's discovery, but at the violation of his sanctuary. He held the collection of devices in his palm like live grenades, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The tech team traced the signal to a receiver registered to Oleg Morozov, Alexander's cousin, his lieutenant, the man with the easy smile who always had a joke ready, who brought Evan candies and played checkers with him in the garden. They found Oleg in the study, lounging in an armchair as if he owned it. His explanation flowed smooth as honey, feeding Caruso harmless information, nudging Alexander toward legitimate business, protecting the family's future. Each word dripped with reasonable concern and familial devotion. "You're getting soft, cousin," Oleg said, spreading his hands. "Someone needs to think about our legacy." Alexander's response was ice cold and final. "Your rank is stripped. You're confined to the guest house until I decide whether blood outweighs betrayal." Guards escorted Oleg out, his protest echoing down the hall. Celia watched him go, noting how his shoulders remained relaxed, how his steps never faltered. Something about his composure sent a chill down her spine. The day passed in tense silence. Alexander worked in his study, making calls and reviewing security footage. Celia helped Evan with his speech exercises, trying to shake off her unease. As twilight approached, she went to check on him before dinner. The bedroom door stood slightly open. The bed was still warm, covers thrown, back as if Evan had just climbed out. His favorite toy car lay on its side on the carpet, wheels still spinning slowly. The scream that tore from Celia's throat brought the house to a grinding halt. Guards flooded the corridors as Alexander appeared at her side, taking in the scene with deadly clarity. The window was secure, the door showed no signs of force. This was someone who knew the house, who had access, who Evan would follow willingly. The burner phone rang at exactly 8:47 p.m. Oleg's voice trembled with what might have been fear or excitement. "Nothing personal, cousin, just business, 1 suitcase, unmarked bills, safe passage out of the city. You have 1 hour to decide if your wife's son is worth the price." Alexander's face settled into something beyond rage, a terrible stillness that promised violence with surgical precision. But when he spoke, his voice was controlled. "Name the amount." While he negotiated, Katya spread a city map across the dining room table. She marked possible locations based on the call's background noise. Water, industrial machinery, distant traffic. The riverfront warehouses formed a clear pattern of possibility. Celia grabbed her coat, checking the weight of the gun Katya had given her weeks ago. When Alexander started to protest, she cut him off. "He's my son. I'm coming with you." "It's not safe." "Nothing about this life is safe. You promised to protect us both. So protect us both." Their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills until Alexander nodded once, sharp and decisive. He extended his hand to her, an offer and a promise wrapped in one gesture. "Together then, but you stay close, and you follow my lead." The war room formed around them with military precision. Katya's team triangulated the signal to 3 possible locations along the river. Weapons were distributed, roles assigned, contingencies planned. Through it all, Alexander kept hold of Celia's hand, his grip firm and grounding. The night pressed against the windows, city lights glittering like broken glass. Maps covered every surface, marked with potential routes and sniper positions. Katya cleaned her rifle with mechanical efficiency while support teams moved into position throughout the city. Celia felt the weight of the gun at her hip, the pressure of Alexander's hand in hers, the cold determination settling in her chest. They would go into hell together, and God help anyone who stood in their way. The city slept under a bruised sky, streetlights casting pools of sickly yellow as their convoy cut through empty streets. In the lead car, Alexander's fingers flew across 3 screens: traffic cameras, satellite feeds, facial recognition software, scanning every shadow. Beside him, Celia pressed her forehead to the cool glass, willing each passing building to somehow reveal her son. "There," Katya murmured from the front seat, highlighting a grainy frame. A dark SUV, plates obscured, turning east toward the river at 3:47 a.m. Alexander made one call, voice like gravel. "Override the sealed feeds for Sector 7. A pause. "Yes, I know what time it is. Do it now." More screens lit up, showing the industrial district's maze of warehouses and loading docks. The SUV appeared again, then vanished into a familiar zone of darkness, the burned-out warehouse complex where 2 years ago an explosion had stolen Evan's hearing and changed everything. "The symmetry's deliberate," Alexander said quietly. "Oleg's trying to make a point." Celia's hands curled into fists. "About what?" "That I've gone soft. That caring makes us vulnerable." He switched screens, jaw tight. He thinks he's teaching me a lesson. The convoy slowed as they approached the warehouse district. Ancient brick buildings loomed like tombstones, windows blown out, walls scarred black. Celia recognized the specific warehouse instantly, the one that had shaken her apartment that night, the one whose blast wave had damaged her son's ears. Now its skeleton stood as a monument to violence, waiting to witness more. They cleared the perimeter methodically. No sign of Oleg or Evan, but fresh tire tracks led through the ash toward the river. In the cold shell of the main floor, their flashlights caught fragments of melted glass, twisted metal, the ghost of what happened here. Alexander stopped in the center of the space, shoulders rigid. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "If I fail you now, if I fail him, there's nothing left of me worth saving." The words hung in the pre-dawn air between them. Celia turned to face him, stripped down to bone-deep honesty by fear and exhaustion and need. "Bring him home," she whispered, "and I'll stop pretending I don't want the man as much as the protector. I'll stop fighting what's been growing between us since that first night." His breath caught. Before he could respond, Katya's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Second burner phone just pinged. Signal's coming from the old Riverside cannery, half a mile east. The security system's outdated. I can get us in through the loading bay." Alexander switched instantly to tactical mode, laying out the plan. "We use the ledger as the real trade piece, cash as a visible decoy. I want eyes on every exit, rooftop coverage, and a medical team on standby." The team dispersed to their positions. Katya's people melted into the shadows with rifles and night vision. 2 cars circled to the back entrance. Alexander turned to Celia with a Kevlar vest in his hands. "You're not staying in the car?" It wasn't a question. She held out her arms and let him secure the straps, his fingers careful and precise. When he finished, he didn't step back. 10 minutes, he said softly. "We go in, we get our boy, we get out. Stay behind me unless I signal otherwise. If anything happens." "Nothing happens," she cut him off. "We're bringing him home." The drive to the cannery took 4 minutes that felt like years. The building squatted by the river like a sleeping beast, rust-streaked walls disappearing into pre-dawn fog. Loading docks gaped like hungry mouths. Somewhere inside, her son was waiting. Alexander's hand found hers in the dark car interior. His palm was warm, steady, grounding. For 10 seconds, they held that connection, saying everything they couldn't voice. Apology, promise, determination, fear. 60 seconds to position, Katya murmured through the comms. They separated smoothly, muscle memory from hours of planning. Celia checked her weapon one last time, feeling the weight of the vest, the press of the backup knife at her ankle. Alexander moved like a shadow toward the east entrance, every line of his body coiled and deadly. The fog rolled in from the river, thick enough to taste. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn mourned. Celia counted her breaths, waiting for the signal, knowing that in moments they would step into the lion's mouth and pray they were strong enough, fast enough, loving enough to survive what waited inside. Katya's voice whispered through the earpiece. 50 seconds. The cannery loomed above them, its broken windows like blind eyes. Metal groaned as the old building settled. The team moved into final position. Jorge on the roof, Mari at the loading dock, twins Stefan and Sasha covering the fire exits. 40 seconds. Celia touched the spot over her heart where Evan's last drawing was folded. A crayon masterpiece of their family, stick figures holding hands. She had promised him pancakes for breakfast. She had promised him safety. 30 seconds! The fog curled around their ankles like cats. Alexander was a darker shadow against the gray wall, absolutely still except for the steady rise and fall of his chest. The man who had bought her son's hearing, the monster who was risking everything to bring him home. 20 seconds! The river breathed beside them, ancient and indifferent. Somewhere inside, Oleg waited with his lessons about weakness and strength. Somewhere inside, her son needed her to be brave enough to walk into darkness. 10 seconds! Celia flexed her fingers on her weapon, remembering Katya's training. Remember your breathing. Remember your stance. Remember why you fight. The countdown continued in their ears as the sky lightened fraction by fraction. Just before they moved, Alexander's hand found hers one more time. A single squeeze. Promise, prayer, and war cry, all in one. Then they separated into the fog, each to their assigned position, as the final numbers ticked down toward whatever waited inside. The cannery's interior stretched vast and hollow, metal catwalks threading through shadows like cobwebs. Stale air carried the ghosts of old fish and rust. Near the center of the concrete floor, Oleg paced an uneven circle, his expensive shoes scuffing patterns in decades of dust. The gun in his hand wavered, too loose in his grip, too tight on the trigger. Evan sat cross-legged where he'd been told, small shoulders straight, hands folded exactly as instructed. 2 years of speech therapy had taught him stillness when adults spoke. His eyes, sharp and watchful, caught movement by the loading dock first. "Mama," he mouthed, the word trembling on his lips. Oleg spun, gun jerking up. "Stay back, all of you!" Alexander emerged from the shadows like smoke becoming solid, his voice carried across the space, measured and cold. "You remember the summer at grandmother's dacha, cousin? You were afraid of the dark then, too." "Don't," Oleg's laugh cracked. "Don't try to make this about childhood. This is about now, about being seen." "I see you clearly," that Alexander replied. "I see a boy who never learned that betrayal is the ugliest way to be noticed." Celia moved slowly into view, hands visible, voice steady as a heartbeat. "We brought what you asked for. The ledger, the money, clean papers. There's a car waiting at the south dock. Let him come to me and you can walk away." Above them, silent as a ghost, Katya glided along the catwalk. Her rifle found angles, calculated trajectories through the maze of pipes and beams. "You think I'm stupid?" Oleg's voice pitched higher. "The moment he moves, I'm dead. I know how this works. I've watched you do it for years." "No one has to die here," Celia said, taking another careful step. "Your cousin is giving you a choice. Take it." Memories flickered across Oleg's face. Summer gardens, shared meals, the weight of expectations he could never quite meet. His hand trembled on the gun. "I just wanted to matter," he whispered. "To be first just once." "You mattered," Alexander answered, something old and pained in his voice. "You were family, until you chose this." The moment stretched like wire about to snap. Evan's eyes darted between the adults, reading lips, reading tension. Oleg's breath hitched. It happened in heartbeats. Oleg's nerve broke, the gun jerked up. Alexander lunged forward, the shot cracked off concrete. Celia moved without thinking, pure maternal instinct carrying her across the space. She slammed into Evan, knocking him toward Alexander's waiting arms. The second shot went wild. Katya's rifle barked once, precise as surgery. Oleg fell. Silence dropped like a bell jar. The echoes died. Somewhere distant, a gull screamed. Alexander didn't move, didn't breathe, until he was certain the small chest against his was rising and falling steadily. Blood smeared his palm where he'd scraped it, catching Evan. The child trembled, eyes squeezed shut. Celia crossed to them in 3 steps, pressing Evan's ear to Alexander's chest. "Listen, baby," she whispered. "Listen to the safest sound. Count the beats with me." Slowly, muscle by muscle, Evan relaxed into that steady rhythm. His small hand fisted in Alexander's shirt. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Alexander made a choice he rarely allowed himself. He chose sunlight over shadows. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. "District Attorney Chen?" "Yes, I know what time it is. I have something you'll want to see. A ledger. Proof of Caruso's customs fraud, money laundering, everything. Yes, that's right. Self-defense shooting at the Riverside Cannery. My security team responded to a kidnapping. Full cooperation, of course." He ended the call, nodded to Katya. She understood, began staging the scene, moving shell casings, adjusting angles, creating a truth that could live in daylight. Morning crept through broken windows, painting silver stripes across the concrete. Evan, swimming in Alexander's suit jacket, pressed closer between them. His fingers found Celia's hand, squeezing tight. "Home," he murmured, the word careful and clear. Celia's free hand found Alexander's, completing the circle. For the first time since that night in the judge's chambers, since the contract and the vows and all the careful walls between them, they understood home the same way, not as a place, but as this. 3 heartbeats finding the same rhythm, 3 bodies breathing the same air, 3 souls choosing each other in the quiet after chaos. Evan's hearing aid chimed softly, catching the first birdsong of morning. Outside, police lights painted the fog red and blue. Katya's team moved with practiced efficiency, building the story that would hold up in court. The river rolled past, ancient and uncaring, washing away old blood and older ghosts. In the center of the cannery floor, they held that moment of understanding between them like a pearl. Precious, perfect, and entirely their own. Sirens grew closer. Soon there would be questions, statements, the machinery of justice grinding into motion. But for now there was just this, a family made by choice instead of blood, standing in the strengthening light of dawn, learning the shape of the word home together. Morning light slashed through the hotel's conference room as reporters jostled for position. On every screen, headlines scrolled like digital drumbeats. Caruso empire crumbles, customs fraud exposed, dockside cleanup begins. District Attorney Chen stood at the podium, brandishing papers that glinted like weapons under the cameras. But Alexander wasn't there to watch his enemy fall. Instead, he sat in a softly lit clinic room, watching something far more important. Evan perched on the edge of an examination chair, feet swinging, as the audiologist adjusted settings on a small tablet. A metronome ticked steadily on the desk between them. "Ready?" the specialist asked, exaggerating the words so Evan could read her lips. The boy nodded, his face scrunched in concentration. When the first tone chimed, his finger tapped the desk, perfectly in sync. His eyes lit up at the achievement. "That's my boy," Alexander murmured, the praise automatic and genuine. The words still felt new on his tongue, but they fitted there like they belonged. Celia, watching from her chair by the window, caught the moment and held it, the feared Volkov patriarch, leaning forward with undisguised pride as her son mastered another small victory. The man who had ordered deaths was teaching life, one heartbeat at a time. After the session, while Evan explored the waiting room's toy corner under Katya's watchful eye, Alexander drew Celia into the quiet corridor. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Legal papers, still warm from the printer. "What's this?" she asked, though something in her already knew. "The emergency guardianship clause. I'm burning it." He met her eyes steadily. "You never have to fear losing him. Not to me, not to anyone." Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. The prenuptial agreement had been rewritten, transformed from a cage into armor, every clause now bent toward her autonomy, financial independence, custody rights, exit options if she needed them. "You're giving me the power to leave," she said softly. "I'm giving you the power to choose to stay." He touched her chin, lifting her face to his. "On your terms, not mine." She studied him, this dangerous man who had learned to be gentle, this wolf who had chosen to guard instead of hunt. The truth rose in her throat, unstoppable as dawn. Freedom means nothing if it takes me from this, she whispered. From what we're building, from who you've become with us. His breath caught. She pressed on, laying out her own terms like cards on a table. Be ruthless to the world if you must, but be gentle with us. Be father to him in all the ways that matter. Love him as fiercely as you fight. I already do, his voice roughened. Both of you. They collected Evan and drove home through streets humming with the aftershocks of Caruso's fall. News vans clustered around police precincts. Suited officials hurried between federal buildings. But their car slipped past it all, carrying them toward the quiet sanctuary they'd forged from chaos. That evening, after Evan was asleep and the house had settled into its nighttime rhythm, Alexander found Celia in the library. She stood by the window, city lights painting her in gold and shadow. When he touched her shoulder, she turned into him like a flower seeking sun. The kiss started soft, a question asked and answered in the press of lips, the slide of tongues. But gentleness gave way to hunger, months of tension finally breaking. His hands spanned her waist, hers fisted in his shirt. Yes, he murmured against her throat. Yes, she breathed back. They made it to his bedroom, their bedroom now, leaving a trail of dropped clothes and shattered restraint. The sheets smelled like fresh laundry and possibility. When he laid her down, the moonlight turned her skin to pearl. Every touch was both question and answer. His mouth on her breast. May I? Her arch into his hand. Please. His teeth at her throat. Tell me. Her nails down his back. More. They came together like waves meeting shore, inevitable, powerful, perfect. He whispered. Praise into her skin. She gasped commands into his mouth. When pleasure crested, it felt like falling and flying at once. After, they lay tangled in sheets and starlight, heartbeats gradually slowing. A soft whine drew their attention to the floor where a dog, rescued that morning on impulse from a shelter, had claimed the rug as his new domain. The German Shepherd mix thumped his tail once, then settled back to sleep. We're going to need a bigger bed, Celia murmured, laughing softly as Alexander pulled her closer. Whatever you want, he promised, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Through the wall, they could hear Evan's quiet breathing in the next room. The house creaked gently, settling into its bones. Outside, the city buzzed with the aftermath of justice, but in here, peace wrapped around them like a blanket. Celia traced idle patterns on Alexander's chest, feeling his heart steady beneath her palm. This was what safety felt like. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of protection. Not the denial of darkness, but the choice to kindle light. Sleep found them still wrapped together, her head tucked under his chin, his arm curved possessive and tender around her waist. The dog snored softly on his claimed rug. Through the window, stars wheeled above a city being remade, while inside these walls, a family born of choice, rather than blood, dreamed of mornings to come. Sunlight spilled through the windows, painting warm squares across the living room floor where string lights twinkled even in daylight. Celia had insisted on them, claiming they made the austere space feel like home. Now they cast a gentle glow over a scene she never could have imagined those first desperate days. Alexander knelt on the Persian rug, his usual pristine appearance delightfully disheveled. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and his fitted black t-shirt bore traces of breakfast. Before him, Evan sat cross-legged, face scrunched in concentration as they worked through his speech exercises. Try again, Alexander encouraged, exaggerating the shape of the letter. Feel how your tongue moves. Evan mimicked the motion, determination etched on his small features. The sound came out garbled at first, then clearer with each attempt. Finally, it emerged perfect and strong. I did it! Evan shouted, jumping up with such excitement that Zeus, their German shepherd, leapt to his feet and let out a series of happy barks. Alexander's face lit with genuine pride. Perfect, he praised, ruffling Evan's hair. Again? Celia leaned against the doorframe, her heart squeezing at the sight. The man who had terrified her weeks ago now sat on her floor, teaching her son with infinite patience. The transformation wasn't just in how she saw him. It was in how he allowed himself to be seen. Her phone buzzed with an unwelcome interruption. Her former landlord had contacted a tabloid, hoping to cash in on her story. Before she could worry, Alexander's lawyer called, with a solution that involved contracts and NDAs rather than threats. He handled it cleanly, legally, proving that daylight methods could work just as well as shadows. Mama, Evan called, spotting her. Listen, he demonstrated his new mastery of the troublesome sound, beaming when she clapped. Beautiful, she praised, moving to join them on the rug. Zeus immediately flopped across her lap, tail thumping against the floor. The morning melted into afternoon, punctuated by speech practice, reading sessions, and the constant background music of their son's growing confidence. They'd moved the heavy kitchen table into the bay window alcove, letting natural light flood their meals. Now they gathered there for an early dinner, Evan chattering about his week at school while Zeus hoped for dropped scraps. Mrs. Martinez says I'm catching up fast, he reported proudly, carefully enunciating each word. That's because you work so hard, Celia said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. Alexander watched them both with quiet intensity, something soft and determined in his expression. After they cleared the dishes, he drew Celia out to the garden, where early evening painted the sky in watercolor hues. Marry me, he said simply. She raised an eyebrow. We are married. Marry me again, properly. He gestured to the space around them. Not in some sterile office, but here, under the trees, with fairy lights and music, with people who matter, not witnesses who were paid to attend. The proposal shouldn't have affected her. They were already legally bound. But this was different. This wasn't about contracts or exchanges. This was pure choice. Say it now, she whispered, stepping closer. What do you really want to promise? He cupped her face in his hands, eyes intense and honest. You're mine, not as an order, as a promise. You and Evan, you're my family, my home, my reason for choosing better paths. They planned it for the following weekend, keeping it intimate and meaningful. The garden transformed under twinkling lights, strung through the trees. Chairs arranged in neat rows faced a simple arch woven with white flowers. Katya arrived in an elegant black dress that somehow still managed to hide at least 2 weapons, though her smile was genuine as she took her seat. The surgeon who had given Evan back his sound sat in the second row, and other carefully chosen guests filled the remaining chairs. When the justice of the peace began speaking, Evan turned at the sound of Celia, his face lighting up at hearing his mother's name ring clear as bells. He stood between them, holding both their hands, a physical bridge between past and future. Alexander's voice was steady and sure as he spoke his vows, but his fingers trembled slightly against hers. I choose you, freely and completely. I promise to protect without caging, to love without demanding, and to be worthy of the trust you've given me, forever, and loud enough for you both to hear. Celia's voice shook with emotion as she answered, rewriting their story from arrangement to choice. The kiss they shared sealed more than just vows. It was a promise of the life they'd built from chaos, the family they'd forged from necessity and transformed through love. Zeus, wearing a bow tie that had somehow survived the ceremony, barked his approval as guests applauded. Evan hugged them both, his laughter pure and clear in the evening air. Above them, string lights twinkled like earthbound stars, warming the space that had become their sanctuary. Alexander held them both, his dangerous hands gentle on his family, his empire now dedicated to keeping them safe rather than simply powerful. In his arms, Celia felt the perfect balance they'd found. The protection of his strength with the freedom of his respect, the intensity of his love with the certainty of his trust.